Hello and welcome to Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. Happy Friday. Can you tell I'm in a good mood today? Last show before I get a vacation, which I need. Don't we all need a vacation? The good news is, though, as I've said, we have some awesome content for you while I'm gone. Starting Monday, we're running a special series celebrating truth tellers in our communities, truth tellers on everything from crime to homelessness to substance abuse to COVID-19. I'm going to talk with two of my favorite mayors in Washington about their pushback over some of these nonsensical public safety policies. So it's going to be really awesome stuff. Subscribers will have early access to all of it, all 6 episodes. And so I really hope you enjoy it because I had such an awesome time having these conversations. And they excite me so much about the possibilities and about what can happen when one person, regardless of what they're doing, whether they're living a private life or somebody who's already been active, the impact one person can have when they just decide enough is enough. Like, I'm speaking my truth. I don't care what people have to say about it. So I hope you are inspired by our series. And I'll preview that series coming up at the end of today's episode. Man, I'm just feeling good. I feel like a Friday dance, and look at my waist right now. Woo! I'm going on vacation and I'm all like, woo, skinny again because of I'll do an Eastside weight loss commercial later. See, I get excited about it even when I'm not in the commercial. Whew. Okay. A lot to talk about today, and I want to get to what happened at the Washington State Capitol this week. I so appreciate those of you who came down to the Capitol for a rally we held on Wednesday in combination with Future 42, which I'm an ambassador for, to urge them to take action to fix the state's failed police pursuit policy. It was a really emotional rally. We heard from a mom whose 12-year-old daughter was killed in what was a preventable crash, also the sister of that 12-year-old. And then there was some action. There was some unprecedented movement in Olympia, but the fight's not over, so we're going to discuss that. Also coming up, as I teased on the Wednesday subscriber show, I just had a lot of stuff to cover on the show on Wednesday, but I told you I wanted to also get to this whole ordeal with Tucker Carlson and the January 6th tapes and comments he's made about January 6th, while also discussing an attack on a police training facility in Atlanta. And just, again, both of them being examples of how we have this selective morality going on as a society. Not us, we're perfect, obviously, right? But society at large has this selective morality about what bothers them and what doesn't based on what political party or the politics of the person involved. Let's see. Also coming up on Florida Report, my sister is here to talk about not one, but 2 potential presidential contenders coming out of the state of Florida. But first, I've got to start with, I feel like I have become the defender-in-chief for my friend Jonathan Choe. If you're not familiar, if you're new to the podcast, Jonathan Choe is a former Seattle TV reporter. He got fired because cancel culture came for him. And he now is a senior fellow with Discovery Institute, which is a conservative think tank, but they started this journalism arm called fixhomelessness.org. And so Jonathan goes around doing really in-depth, really rugged reporting on the homelessness crisis, the drug crisis, the crime crisis. I mean, honestly, even if you are far to the left, I don't see how you look at his stuff and say it's not journalistic. But there's this ongoing debate about whether Jonathan is considered a journalist because he is working for a conservative think tank. And if you're not familiar, I wrote this long, in-depth investigative piece about this whole issue a couple months ago. It's up at Patreon and Locals. And it was the result of months of public disclosure requests. And it looked at how high up Democrats in Washington state were trying to crush independent media dissent like Jonathan Choe by sometimes physically blocking him from press conferences, sometimes, just taking him off press lists or not allowing him to RSVP for press events. There had been 2 high-profile incidents, as you know by now, with Jonathan Choe, both of them involving King County Executive Dow Constantine. In one instance, Dow Constantine fled a room to avoid answering Jonathan Choe's legitimate questions about public safety in Chinatown. And Choe chased him out, and then Dow went down an elevator to avoid the questions. So, the executive who wants to be governor made it much more dramatic than it needed to be. He should have just answered the questions and moved on. And then like a month later, the King County Executive's staff physically blocked Choe from touring a homelessness facility with the rest of the press. And as if it couldn't get any worse, sometimes I expect that kind of just blatant ideological hypocrisy in Seattle, right? Where they would condemn Donald Trump for what he did and said about the press, but they can treat Jonathan Choe like this. Well, the city of Kirkland, gosh, I love you, Kirkland. I love Kirkland. I think downtown Kirkland is great. Juanita Beach, just wonderful, wonderful suburb of Seattle, safer than Seattle. You're better than this. Oh my God. Okay, this video is going to piss you guys off. And it should piss off everyone. It should piss off every single person who believes in the First Amendment, every single person who supports a free press. In particular, it should piss off journalists. Although I don't see any mainstream journalists, and maybe I've missed some, but any mainstream journalists coming to Jonathan's defense. So a little background here. So Governor Jay Inslee was in Kirkland on Wednesday to talk about efforts it was at Kirkland City Hall, okay? So the People's House in Kirkland, to talk about the opening of a new crisis stabilization center. So I got the press release on this. It was sent on March 7th, so that was Tuesday, events on Wednesday. And at the very bottom, it says, credentialed media are welcome to attend. Credentialed media are welcome to attend. And this is how they control what media goes, because they'll say, oh, well, we're not going to give a credential to Jonathan Choe because the governor's office doesn't deem him media. But Jonathan Choe apparently does reach out to the city of Kirkland, gets an email back saying, yep, you're welcome to come, credentialed. And he went there as a freelancer for the Mill Creek View. Like some news publications that are outside the mainstream have given him a press credential so he can get past this sort of barrier that he's dealing with. I want you to watch, or if you're on the podcast, listen to what the city of Kirkland's communications director did to Jonathan Choe after Jonathan Choe was already in the event, before the event started. It is unfreaking real.
Who are you?
I'm David Holbrecht.
You're who?
I'm David Holbrecht. I'm the communications program manager.
With who?
The city of Kirkland.
Got it.
Yeah.
This is my credential right here.
Okay, so
I got permission also from Sue Romero, an email saying that she welcomes me, and I have that email. I could be more than happy to prove in.
Okay, well, I'm sorry, but you're not a guest here today, and so we'll need you to leave.
Well, I responded to an RSVP and I was given permission. Would you like to see the email?
No, I'm familiar with the email.
Okay.
Yeah, I was talking with Sue about it.
So why would Sue give me permission?
Yeah, and so it's a matter of credentialing.
Right. My credential is right here. I'm contributing to multiple platforms, and again, I RSVP'd and I have an email which clearly...
From who?
Sue Romero.
Yeah, from Sue,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
And so,
I have it in writing that I was given permission here, so I'd like to stay and ask a few questions about this project.
Okay.
That's okay. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Wow. Oh, man. So eventually Jonathan's allowed to stay. And he had an email from somebody, I'm assuming, with the city who said, or who didn't know this whole thing with Democrats trying to keep Jonathan Choe from all these press conferences. So Jonathan pushes back. He's like, I'll show you the email. He's got a press credential from Mill Creek View. But to hear this guy from the city of Kirkland, let's go back and play another part of that again.
Well, I'm sorry, but you're not a guest here today, and so we'll need you to leave.
Wow. You're not a guest here today. Let's dissect that in a couple different ways. First of all, he has an email saying that he is invited to attend after he asked to attend as a credentialed member of the press. So clearly he is a guest there. You might disagree, and the person who sent the email might disagree with you, but that's not Jonathan's fault. The other thing is, I have no doubt the city of Kirkland is doing someone's bidding here. Now, I have filed a public disclosure request to find out whose bidding that might be. Is it the bidding of the King County Executive's office? Is it the bidding of the governor's office, where they said, hey, if Jonathan Choe shows up, kick him out? I don't think the city of Kirkland, I could be wrong, but I don't think the city of Kirkland did this on their own. I think they're doing someone's bidding. Shame on them. Now, all of that aside, if you are firmly in the camp of, no, he works for a think tank, it's an ideological organization, he's not a member of the press, he shouldn't be credentialed, think about that again. I'm sorry, but you're not a guest here today. May I remind you of where they are? They are at Kirkland City Hall. City Hall. A building paid for by taxpayers, a building meant to serve taxpayers and the public. And the person telling him you're not an invited guest here is also someone who is paid by the taxpayers. So even if you don't consider Jonathan Choe a journalist, for a public servant, quote unquote, to tell anyone in that scenario that you're not an invited guest here, you're not a guest here, you don't get to decide, short of someone breaking the law inside that building, you don't get to decide who's an invited guest. This should bother everyone. It is beyond shameful to me at this point. I mean, I was ashamed of the media the first time they didn't stand up for Jonathan Choe. The second time, I just thought, they're irredeemable. If this were a journalist, even if they worked for some sort of ideological organization, being treated this way by Republicans, it would not be allowed to stand. And that's when we get back to this issue of moral consistency. I've been consistent. That might sound sanctimonious, but I have the receipts. When journalists have been attacked by Donald Trump, Jim Acosta, when he was, revoked of his press credential, when journalists were pepper sprayed down at the state capitol by some anti-lockdown whack job. I don't think being against lockdowns makes you a whack job. I think pepper spraying journalists makes you a whack job, just so we're clear. I've been consistent on this issue. When journalists have been attacked at Trump rallies, that happened a couple times in the Midwest, when journalists like myself were attacked at far left rallies, it shouldn't matter. And above and beyond all of that, a pet peeve of mine, I think it should be against the law. I've said this before. It should be a crime for people we pay with taxpayer funds to actively obstruct us from getting information. And Jonathan is someone who is in the business of disseminating information. So as I said, I have a request in to the city of Kirkland, and I'm taping this show early today. They might get back to me late. If they do, I'll post an update in the comments. I have a request in from them, to them. Let me read you the questions that I laid out for them. To this guy in the video, Mr. Walbrecht. I said, "Hi, David. Just saw the exchange with Jonathan Choe. I have a few questions. 1, whose decision was it to ask Choe to leave? 2, why was Choe asked to leave? 3, did the King County Executive's Office have any communication with you or other City of Kirkland employees about Choe's presence? And 4, did the Governor's Office have any communication with you or other City of Kirkland employees about Choe's presence?" Again, I think the City of Kirkland is a lot better than this. I think they should be above the crazy shit that happens in Seattle and the, how do I even describe Dow Constantine? Thin skin. This thin skin of people like Dow Constantine, who instead of just doing what the mayor of Seattle does when Choe shows up somewhere, politely answers his questions. The thin-skinned King County executive who wants to be a thin-skinned governor can't even tolerate Choe's presence, doesn't even want to answer a question from him. I think the city of Kirkland is better than that. I'm disappointed, and I hope that I hear that I get some answers from them. I don't think that there's a logical explanation. I don't think there's any explanation that could be satisfactory for me, because there's no excuse for that behavior. But hopefully we can get to the bottom of who was pulling the strings. I want to thank you guys for your tireless work so far this session in contacting your elected leaders. I know you guys have been sending emails, making phone calls, and on Wednesday, several of you also made a trip down to the Washington State Capitol, met me on the steps at 1 p.m. We were there with Future 42, which I'm an ambassador for, to talk about and to urge elected leaders to pass a police pursuit fix. Wednesday at 5 p.m. was this deadline, and we were on the steps of the Capitol at 1 p.m. And joining us was a woman whose 12-year-old daughter, Immaculate, was killed by a guy driving a stolen landscaping truck in Pierce County. And so she's, she had a sleepover with her best friend. They're walking across the street by their house, hand in hand. It's two young girls, and this truck kills Immaculate instantly, and her friend was seriously wounded. And the reason this has to do with police pursuits is essentially this guy, police had tried to chase him previously before this happened. They weren't able to. If they had been, he would have been in jail. He wouldn't have been in that stolen landscape truck. And so, as Immaculate's mom said, my daughter is a victim of the no pursuit policy. I just want to play not only a clip from her, from Amber, but also from Immaculate's sister, who spoke as well.
My name is Amber Goldade, and I'm here to honor my daughter Immaculate and to give her a voice. My 12-year-old daughter Immaculate and her best friend Kathleen are victims of the no pursuit law. Last year on January 15th, as they were walking home, they were holding hands. They were hit from behind by a large stolen landscaping truck.
This right here is a picture of my sister. She had so many dreams and goals. She was so beautiful. She loved life. She was cared for everyone and everything. She was so compassionate.
As a mother who lost her child, I beg you, I urge you, I challenge you to do the right thing.
Now, just as we were wrapping this rally up, we all heard that on the floor of the Senate, something very interesting was happening. So on Wednesday's show, we talked about the fact that Republicans in the House tried this procedural move to pull the pursuit bill to the floor and out of committee, and Democrats blocked it. Well, in the Senate, behind the scenes, some moderate Democrats were working with their party to do the same thing, to pull it out of Law and Justice Committee in the Senate and get it to the floor. So behind the scenes, the Democratic caucus agreed, okay, we're going to put a watered-down version of the pursuit fix on the floor. Republicans will try to add amendments to strengthen it. But the agreement was, because the caucus is split, so progressives in the caucus basically agreed, we won't stop this from coming up for a vote, but if you tack on or allow any Republican amendments to be tacked onto this, then we will vote it down. And so I went to the floor of the Senate and watched some of this debate unfold as, Republicans did bring forth amendments to try to strengthen the bill. Because right now, if it passes as is, it would allow police more leeway to pursue suspects for certain crimes, like if they're a suspect in a violent crime, a sex crime, a domestic violence assault, if they're a fugitive from justice, if they're suspected of vehicular assault, for instance. But it doesn't include stolen vehicles, which is kind of the key, because that's been one of the main issues that has really exploded in our communities, are these people in stolen vehicles fleeing from God knows what, or using this stolen vehicle to go do God knows what, and they can't pull them over. And again, I would point out Immaculate died. She was hit by a stolen vehicle. So I'll play for you quickly. And I'm sitting in the wings of the Senate, watching this all go down. And some of the testimony from Democrats, I couldn't believe the lack of self-awareness. And, I'll play Manka Dhingra first. So Senator Manka Dhingra, we've talked about a lot. This is someone who to this day has not admitted that she was using a debunked, unreliable study to justify the 2021 police pursuit policy. We went over that at length on, I think, Monday's show, so I don't have to dive into it again. But this is a woman who claims over and over and over she cares about data. Yet even when it became clear that she'd relied on unreliable data, she just sort of ignored it. So anytime she talks about data from here on out, I just am like, absolutely not. You don't actually care about the validity of data. You only want to see and hear about data that confirms your worldview or a policy that you're already trying to push. I mean, it's blatantly obvious to me. So here's a little bit of Senator Manka Dhingra on the floor.
I always love hearing statistics and data being used on the floor, because I think it's really important for us to be data-driven, evidence-based. While motor vehicle thefts have been rising, that rise began in 2020. 18 months before the law changed, and the same increases have been seen in Oregon and California, in states that have not changed their pursuit policy. That's data. Vehicle rates, vehicles being stolen, those rates consistently track used car prices. That is what drives car thefts, not vehicle pursuit policies. The issue here is protecting human life or protecting property. That is the analysis that we have to do when we're taking a look at this amendment.
So Senator Dingera goes tooth and nail against this thing, tooth and nail. Can't do it. And then when it actually came down to a vote, yay or nay on this watered down police pursuit policy, here's her vote.
Senator Dingera, how do you vote? Senator Dingera votes aye.
So the woman who single-handedly kept this from moving out of Law and Justice, who spent hours, during debate on the floor on Wednesday debating against changing the policy, votes for it. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is? It's because she's got something in mind she's going to run for, Attorney General probably of Washington State in 2024. And then she's going to hope people are dumb, and she's going to say, I voted to fix the pursuit law. Even though she fought tooth and freaking nail to make sure that fix never saw the light of day. And people are going to fall for it, by the way. Not us. We're not going to fall for it. We're going to resurrect all that old sound. She doesn't get away with that cheap vote. She took a vote to preserve herself politically for a future run. That's the only reason. It's the only explanation. If she supported the policy, she wouldn't have stopped it from coming out of Law and Justice. So mark my word, mark this date, March 10th, 2023. I've called it. She will claim on the campaign trail, probably for Attorney General, that she supported a pursuit fix. And she'll point to the fact that she voted yes. And we will remind everyone when that time comes that she tried everything she could do to kill it. And when that didn't work, she took the vote that she knew would be politically advantageous to her. We're not going to forget. Now, there was some other testimony on the floor that I was just like, oh my God, get me out of here. I think it's Yasmin Trudeau, who's a senator. I hope I'm saying that right. Hold on, let me just Google quick. I think she's new. Yasmin Trudeau, yes. So God, I've been accused of being sanctimonious, but holy sanctimony on this one. And I think she alluded to me during her testimony, like accusing me of misinformation and disinformation, which is ridiculous. But she didn't say it by name, so I'm not sure. But she was talking about stolen vehicles and that whole debate over whether, police should be able to pursue over a stolen vehicle. Here's what she said.
I want to take us back to what this amendment presents us, which I believe is a false choice. And that is the idea that a vehicle being stolen is more important than the individual going across the crosswalk or playing on the sidewalk, or like many neighborhoods in my community, they don't have sidewalks to play on, so they literally play in the street, which puts them at disproportional danger. It's not about the intention of the law enforcement officer. I don't think any of us would assume that any of them would want something bad to happen while they are pursuing an individual. Absolutely not. I think that's one thing that there is great consensus here. We are not accusing individual officers of any malintent. But I think when we look at situations like car theft, and I'll speak a little bit about my own experiences, Mr. President. I've had my car stolen, and it sucks. And I was working a low-wage job, and I had to figure it out. And before the law changed, this was the situation I was in. I was told by law enforcement that there really wasn't much they could do, that I would have to wait until maybe it turned up or something else happened. There was no conversation about whether someone was going to pursue. But what I can tell you, Mr. President, in my heart, is that if I had a choice between preserving the life of an individual in a crosswalk or on the corner or on the sidewalk playing in the street versus getting my car back, I would give up my car every single day. And that's what I think that we need to focus on, is what are we pitting against each other? The sanctity of human life versus a vehicle.
It's very convenient very convenient for her to be able to say, oh, well, I don't care. If my vehicle got stolen, I wouldn't care. I would be patiently waiting to get it back because I would want to save someone's life. And we all know, again, do innocent people die as a result of police pursuits? Yeah, it has happened. It's very rare, much more rare than the crime that's occurring now because police can't pursue vehicles. But she wants to act sanctimonious, like I would give my car to save someone else's life. Of course, if I'm sitting here and I've got my car and somebody comes up to me and says, hey, either I'm going to take your car or someone will die. Of course, you'd be like, yeah, take my car. But she's setting up this straw man to make the rest of us feel bad about ourselves. And it's incredibly transparent. Now, let me save you the displeasure of going and watching, 3 hours of floor debate on this, because there's only one piece of testimony that I think you really need to hear. It comes from a Democrat. And I think he is one of the only Democrats who actually acknowledges the underlying issue. Some of the Democrats who were speaking act as if we want more police pursuits. Like, yeah, we want those 100-mile-an-hour chases with the news helicopter. No, it's dangerous for police. We know it's dangerous for the public. Everyone in proximity to it, it's dangerous for. The issue has never been allow police to pursue, direct police to pursue more people. The issue has always been that we need to make sure criminals are fleeing less. And that means that we have to disincentivize them from fleeing. So State Senator Mark Mullet, a Democrat from Issaquah, he is a moderate Democrat, one of the few remaining moderate Democrats in Olympia. And my understanding is he had a lot to do with pulling this bill to the floor and convincing his caucus to do that. So he deserves a lot of credit for that. His speech to me is the only one you really need to listen to because it gets to the heart of the issue, which is something that the rest of not the rest of the Democrats, but a lot of the other Democrats have been gaslighting on and ignoring intentionally.
Human nature says one of the hardest things in life to do is admit when you've made a mistake. And I voted for this bill back in 2021, and I think the data that I saw at the time was there was a lot of communities throughout our state that had very restrictive pursuit policies, even more restrictive than the one we're voting on today. But I think the unintended consequence, Mr. President, was that the criminals didn't have an Excel spreadsheet that explained what the pursuit policy was in every single jurisdiction. So at the time, even though there was a lot of restrictive pursuit policies, officers weren't dealing with people just driving away when they were pulled over. I think the unintended consequence, Mr. President, of our legislation in 2021 was that it became widely known that we were not going to pursue criminals. That has created a public safety challenge in the state of Washington. That is a reality we are trying to help fix today. And in the 5th Legislative District, we have a variety of communities. I will say Renton is part of that district, and it's the district that has the highest portion of minority residents out of all the cities I represent. It's the mayor of Renton who feels most passionately out of the districts that I represent around getting this fixed. He understands the importance of public safety for his community, and he feels what we have in this underlying bill is actually a good step forward towards fixing some of these problems. And I think we heard from our colleagues, I don't think any of us are claiming that this is a perfect bill to solve all of the issues. But what I feel 100% confident of, Mr. President, is this is better than what we have today on the books. And you've been in this business longer than I have. Public policy is about making incremental progress. And in this bill, we are making incremental progress on public safety in the state of Washington. I encourage everyone's support.
So again, we don't want more police chases. We want fewer criminals to flee. And he makes the perfect point, which is one we have been arguing this whole time, which is when they know they can, they will. When they know they can not only get away with driving off, but get away with getting caught for whatever else they were involved in that would make them want to drive off. If they can, they will. They're criminals. And I hear people saying, well, criminals aren't familiar with the law. We have 911 calls of criminals telling dispatch, tell the police they can't chase me. If you really think that people who are career criminals by now aren't familiar with this policy, then you're fooling yourselves. Again, we want police pursuits to be rare, only in instances where there is a clear and present public safety need. But in order for them to be rare, we need to make it rare for criminals to flee. And that means they have to believe that there are consequences. You guys, I've been hearing from so many of you who have started the Eastside Weight Loss Clinic plan. I've been getting texts on Facebook, posts on Facebook. I saw a woman yesterday saying, hey, just started it. I'm really excited to see results. And I told her what I tell everybody who reaches out to me about it. It's not magic. Like, just stick to it. It's 60 days of your life. I gave it 60 days. I'm 30 pounds lighter. It was like this much time went by. I mean, honestly, I know it's hard to eat healthier, improve your habits, but when you're looking at 60 days to make a substantial change in your life, it's really not a lot of time. No prepackaged meals. You don't have to go into an office to be weighed. You can do the whole thing virtually. So if you want to lose some weight before summer, I mean, I'm going on vacation today. I'm so excited not to be feeling all bloated and heavy like I was in the fall. Give Dr. Coogan with Eastside Weight Loss Clinic a call, or better yet, just schedule a free 15-minute consultation. Do it online. Go to eastsideweightlossklinic.com. That's eastsideweightlossklinic.com. Schedule your free 15-minute consultation. You'll be on your way to losing weight in no time. Dr. Ryan Coogan, DC, results may vary. All right, as I mentioned, we're doing a series starting on Monday, so Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then Monday, Wednesday, Friday the following week, celebrating truth tellers in our community. And so I've been pre-taping these interviews, and I had an interesting chat yesterday. So one of the last ones I taped with was Olga Sagan. So Olga is the owner of Proshki, a famous popular bakery in Seattle, and we've had her on the show before because she, a couple years ago, decided she was going to start speaking out about just the disastrous policies that have absolutely tanked downtown Seattle. And to be honest, I don't even know what Olga's politics are. I don't know if she's right or left. I just know that she's an immigrant to the country. She's a concerned business owner. She's trying to make a living, keep her employees and customers safe. Reasonable. And we went down to her shop last February, so February of 2022, when she decided to close one of her locations temporarily because crime had just absolutely gotten out of control. Here's a short little clip from that story.
I mean, my employee safety is my number one priority. My customer safety is right up there. We would open at 7 a.m., come out in the morning. If there was anybody here, we would ask them to kind of, just please, if you can step away, this is a private property. This was meant for people to have pastries here, and they would stand here, have their coffee, have their pastry. This shelf here that now is a, drug shelf.
So anyway, I had Olga on to talk about her being a truth teller and just, wanting to inspire other business owners to speak up, which I think is really important, particularly in Seattle. And then she dropped a little bombshell that she herself is considering a run for Seattle City Council.
I cannot sit at my home, watch Netflix and be angry at government. I need to say things and keep them accountable as an individual because it is up to us. It is up to us in the city, in the state, in the country to make government accountable. Or if they don't want to be accountable, fine. But it's up to us to speak up and not just, step over people without housing or drug addicts or people with mental illness. Go home, turn your TV and be like, oh, this is disgusting outside. I don't think that's who we should be.
How far are you willing to take that sentiment? I have tried to shame you into running for something. I know other people have tried to as well.
I'm considering running for city council. I know that we have election this year, and I have been thinking about it, and I have been really, really struggling with that decision because I know that if I put my hands and heart and soul into something, it's going to be I will put everything I got. And always we come in as a female, as an immigrant, as a business owner, we have all those insecurities am I qualified? Am I qualified to run? But then I look at some other city councils we have, I'm like, well, if they're qualified, I should be qualified, but I'm not a career politician, and that's kind of throws me off. I'm more after making downtown better, making downtown safe, having it all inclusive and taking care of people. So I am considering running for position 7. I think the goal is to have downtown be in a better shape.
So District 7 is the council seat that represents downtown Seattle. So in my opinion, it's the most critical council seat. And right now it's held by a man named Andrew Lewis, who has been a little flip-flopper, just flops around like a fish on every single little issue, blows with the wind. I mean, he, when he was campaigning in 2019, he said he wanted to hire more police officers. And then 6 months later, he joined the Defund the Police pledge in the Seattle City Council. And then just recently, like in the last 6 months, he's all of a sudden, now that they're coming up on an election year, which is this year, he's published op-eds in the Times talking about how crime has a nexus to homelessness and the drug abuse issue downtown is out of control. And it's like, to me, I'm glad you've come around to the issue for whatever reason. But you have been so all over the place based on whatever, is politically palatable at the time for your base. And, during the summer of 2020, that was defund. So you're like, sign me up. During 2019, it was, we need more police officers. You're like, sign me up. And now he's got an election coming up. Downtown's in shambles. And he's like, we've got a mayor who actually cares about crime. And he's like, oh, well, I care about crime. I believe all these things are an issue. So I just don't trust the guy. It's as slimy to me. I trust someone like Kshama Sawant far more, Socialist City Councilwoman Kshama Sawant, because she is consistent. She is who she is, and she believes what she believes, and she doesn't just bend with the wind. And I can respect that. I don't agree with her, but I can appreciate it. Someone like Andrew Lewis, I don't know if there is a more flip-floppy council member. So he's one of only a couple incumbents who are staying and actually trying to fight for their jobs, which I don't blame a lot of them. And I hope Olga Sagan runs. I truly hope that she runs. And she is a truth teller. She, and again, we had an hour-long conversation that's going to air next week. I don't even know what her politics are. And it doesn't really matter for Seattle City Council seats because they're nonpartisan, quote unquote, but everybody tries to peg you. I'm sure that people will be like, well, she went on Brandi's show, so she's right wing. But the nice thing is she doesn't care. She doesn't care what they say anymore. And there's so much power in that, so much power in her just not caring what those people say. There were some anonymous Twitter accounts with it's not even a real name, it's not a real picture, and they're criticizing her. And it's like, she realizes she can look at that and say, here I am. I'm out here. She's like, I'm out here with my name, putting my business on the line, my reputation on the line. I'm speaking out. And you want to be anonymous on Twitter and hate on me. And it doesn't bother her at all. And that's really the point that I think we all need to get to. But this will be interesting. So my interview with Olga Sagan is scheduled to air next week. It's one of the many good conversations that we have as part of this series. And I hope she does it. I hope that whatever she has left to work out in her mind about whether it would be a good thing for her personally and her family, I hope she can get through that, because if she runs, I think she will win. Okay, before we get to Florida Report, I want to talk about just some glaring hypocrisy that's happening nationally. So I'm sure by now you're familiar with the Tucker Carlson saga. So there's a couple things going on. One, Dominion voting systems have this lawsuit against Fox News. They say Fox News deliberately, intentionally spread disinformation about Dominion and voter fraud, etc. And so there have been some texts between, amongst high-profile Fox figures that have been released as part of that. And I got to say, there's some interesting ones about Tucker Carlson. Here's this guy who, and a network that was pretty, supportive of Donald Trump. And behind the scenes, Tucker Carlson, to his own staff, is talking shit about Donald Trump. And he was talking about how, hold on, I was going to pull this up before I talked about it. He was talking about how he has this ravaged hatred. Let me find the exact words. I hate him passionately. He wrote to a fellow Fox staffer on January 4th, 2021. I hate him passionately. And so this is after, he lost the election, but before January 6th. He went on to say, "We are very, very close to being able to ignore Trump most nights, and I truly can't wait." So when I look at that, all I want out of people is consistency. And when you are, and I think most people, they just don't want you to be a phony, right? And I think that when you're saying one thing on TV to millions of people, and then behind the scenes, you're like, I hate him passionately. Even if you like Tucker Carlson or like Donald Trump, like that probably should bother you. Is like, this person's just, they're putting on a front. That's not what they believe. It's not who they are, but it's what they're telling you to believe. It's what they want you to believe. So I'm deeply bothered by that. I think it just says a lot about Tucker Carlson. But, he's also been airing these tapes that he got from the Republican Party, surveillance stuff about January 6th. And he's been going to great lengths to try to downplay January 6th. There's always this narrative about, they were just tourists. They were being ushered in, etc., which is bullshit. Even if you think that the January 6th rioters have been treated unfairly, if it were BLM during that same time frame that did exactly the same things, like let's say Trump had won and that was BLM, Joe Biden's like, election was stolen, and then left-wing rioters did that to the Capitol. People defending the Capitol riot right now would have lost their freaking minds. And I just refuse, when you have people who did assault police officers, there is video, there is images of it. That is, by any stretch, a riot, unacceptable, an embarrassment to the country that it happened at our nation's capital. And so I don't understand the desire to downplay it. I mean, I do understand the desire. It's politically motivated, right? Now, that being said, when you compare the coverage of January 6th to the coverage of, say, the summer of 2020 and the fiery but mostly peaceful riots, it is unfair. It's ridiculous. The media, CNN went to great efforts. And again, I bring up that famous lower third where you've got Omar Jimenez, the CNN correspondent, standing in front of a bunch of burning cars, and the lower third says fiery but mostly peaceful protests. That's ridiculous. But we have to somehow break free of this. If they did it, bad. If we did it, fine. Because it's tearing the country apart. And it's turning so many people into absolute hypocrites. And then there was this riot, arsons at a police training facility in Atlanta. And when I look at that, I don't care what they're there for. I don't care what they're protesting for. I don't care what their politics are. It's domestic terrorism. When you look at these cop cars on fire, public buildings, etc., it's domestic terrorism. And we had this conversation when, thankfully, this bill died, the one to create a domestic extremism commission in Washington State. Thankfully, that bill is dead. But my whole point was you're trying to create this commission to look at right-wing, white supremacy, etc., while actively ignoring actual visible acts of domestic extremism on the streets of Seattle by the far left and Antifa. So anyway, the protesters, several of them were arrested and accused of domestic terrorism, including a lawyer with the Southern Poverty Law Center who's been charged with domestic terrorism. 23 in total face domestic terrorism charges. And I will say the media did cover that. And I'm happy. I do think it would have been a bigger deal for the media and like the White House if it were right-wingers who had done the exact same thing. So somehow we got to figure out how can we get people to be, and the media in particular, to be morally consistent on this stuff and to judge actions, not affiliation. It's like, let's look at the actions. Is it political violence? Then fine. Then we don't really care what the politics are. So I just thought I'd give some thoughts on Tucker Carlson, and any effort to really downplay January 6th, I think, is incredibly disingenuous. It's counterproductive. Again, I only have to look at some of the images of what happened. Are there some people who just sauntered into the Capitol and, police didn't do anything and didn't commit any other crime than trespassing? Sure. But again, if it had been BLM or Antifa who did the exact same things, ask yourself whether you'd feel the same way. It's Friday. That means time for our segment, Florida Report, with my sister Miranda. And we pre-taped this one on a Thursday because I was flying out today. So here's our conversation on a few political happenings in the Sunshine State.
It's not even controversial anymore.
People know in Florida their freedoms are going to be respected.
Joining us is the uglier of the sisters, my sister Miranda. Ron DeSantis gave his State of the State, which I didn't get a chance to catch it. We'll play a little brief clip from it here.
So we find ourselves in Florida on the front lines in the battle for freedom. Together, we have made Florida the nation's most desired destination, and we have produced historic results. But now's not the time to rest on our laurels. We have the opportunity and indeed the responsibility to swing for the fences so that we can ensure Florida remains number one.
He is Florida's #1 fan, as a governor should be, but it just seems like the slow build to 2024.
Absolutely. He is definitely positioning himself as what he likes to call like ideal Republican leadership. And he touted out quite a few things that he's done in Florida and that everybody wants to come to Florida. And he thinks that, you know, the remedies he's come up with here could possibly work in the rest of the country, which I agree and disagree with, but I think that that's okay.
So instead of Make America Great Again, it's Make America Florida?
I mean, I live here and I love Florida, but I don't think that the things that work in Florida will work everywhere. I think that's what makes the United States so special and why we all need our own leadership, because we all need so many different things.
Wow, very kumbaya of you. But it's true. Florida has some unique issues, just like any other state. Is there kind of this building sense down there that he's going to announce soon?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in my social circle, everybody already thinks he's basically announced it just based off his actions alone is kind of obvious to most of the people down here. And there's really no overwhelming concern for who is going to run our state if he decides to run. So I don't know if we're going to be governorless if he decides to run. I know you guys dealt with that when Inslee decided to put his foot in the game. But, you know, I mean, I think that a lot of things that he's done, you know, in Florida work really well. And then, you know, he focuses on some things that just kind of feel like a waste of time. And the ironicness of everything good that he's done for our state is that it's actually kind of had an adverse effect on the people who live here, in the sense of like the rent prices and cost of living has skyrocketed because so many people want to come live here. And he really is focusing on a lot of things that don't really solve some of the crises that come with being a really fastly growing state. So I hope that he can come around and look back into Florida a little bit while he's making this run for the rest of the nation.
I was just Googling, you use the word ironicness, and I don't
think... Is ironicness?
I'm Googling right now, ironic.
Look, Webster adds words all the time, so...
Ironically... Yeah, that's all right. That's all right. You've used a couple phrases so far just in this short time that I'm not sure are touted out.
Touted out is one.
Well, touted is. Touted, Miranda, you have your own Florida language. Touted. This is really interesting stuff for people as I Googled the phrases you used. I don't know if touted out, but I like it. I don't dislike it. So speaking of DeSantis, who's going to be president, he might have a challenge from within the state. And it's no secret, I'm a big fan of Miami Mayor Francis Suarez. I think he'd be a good addition as a vice presidential person on a ticket, but he is considering perhaps a presidential run.
Yeah, he is. He's extremely popular. He's running right now. He's sitting in his second term, and he's won both terms overwhelmingly down here in Miami. He's been privately holding meetings with a lot of wealthy political financiers. In addition to that, he's kind of mentioned it out loud a few times that he would consider running for president. And in addition to that, he's also mentioned he would consider running for governor. So it'll be interesting to see what order that comes in, because he is very popular. Even Kanye West gave him a little shout out for being a good that he might make a good presidential candidate. So an underdog nonetheless, but I do think that he's Definitely somebody that like nobody should ignore. People should do their research on him and look into him if he really does decide to run, because he really is a pretty awesome politician and person, and a lot of people really like him down here.
Yeah, I've done interviews with him a couple times. I did an op-ed saying I thought he would be a good, like I said, vice presidential addition. I think the idea of a governor would be good. What I like about him is he is all business. Like, he doesn't do a lot of things for the performative value, but he does get himself out there a lot. And to see what he's done with Miami, being a welcoming city for tech companies. And I look at Seattle scaring tech companies away, and there's this interesting just comparison. And they have a plunging homicide rate in Miami, which is completely bucking a national trend. As you and I have talked before, there's very little homelessness, comparatively speaking, in Miami. And as a Republican, I mean, he's a moderate Republican, but it's really an area that, we've talked about this in gubernatorial races, tends to go blue, but lately not so much.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, I think the lines between the blue and the red in Florida have gotten a little blurred, which is probably a good thing. It's getting a little purple down here, but but I think that, you get people like Suarez who are just so reasonable in their politics that you attract support from both sides. So I definitely look forward to seeing what he decides to do. It'd be nice to even see him as a governor, to be honest, if he can take that, the success that he's had with our city and apply it to a state level, and then maybe one day a national level.
All right, so let's talk about one more issue happening in Florida. It has to do with gun laws. So the backstory is, of course, the massacre at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. And then after that, your state raised the age to buy a gun from 18 to 21, correct?
Correct. It was like an immediate response to what happened at Marjory Stoneman Douglas. That was actually sent to an appeals court, a federal appeals court. And on Thursday, that appeals court upheld the Florida law by a 3-0 ruling. So it will stand that you have to be 21 to own, like, legally purchase and own a gun in the state of Florida.
Yeah, one thing, so I'll read the opinion written by Circuit Judge Robin Rosenbaum said that the Florida law was, quote, consistent with our nation's historical tradition of firearm regulation. But I also read in catching up on this story that it might kind of be a moot point soon, because Republicans are in control in the legislature in Florida, and they've introduced a bill that would reverse all that and put it back to 18 from 21.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like politics is always like a game of ping pong where you're just like watching things go back and forth sometimes. I mean, we definitely have done a lot of conversation in Florida about different gun, not restrictions, but like regulations, I guess. I don't really understand raising the age to 21. I think that 18-year-olds already are given a lot of responsibility in this world, and owning a gun should be something that they're entitled to do. But, in addition to that, we talked about it a couple weeks ago where they're also proposing legislation to allow you to carry a gun without a permit, So with that, maybe I wouldn't mind them being 21 years old, not 18, but it's just weird. It'll be nice to see the dust settle a little bit on the gun conversation here in Florida and see what actually comes out of all these back and forths.
Yeah, I don't know if the dust ever settles on the gun conversation, but, I find it so interesting. Like, our state legislature is just poised to push through a ban on what they call assault rifles. And it was interesting, Republicans tried to add an amendment to it that would have said, okay, we'll pass your bill, but we get a right to judicial review, which means it can't go into effect until it's deemed constitutional or not. And Democrats are like, nah, we don't need that. We don't really care if it's constitutional. We're just going to push it through and then come what may. So it's always interesting, this back and forth. Yeah. So we'll see what happens. But much different gun climate, I think, in Florida, certainly than in Washington State.
Absolutely.
All right, Miranda, thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Have fun on your trip.
Thank you. I'm excited. I need some time off, although I'm just stressed because it's the work before the vacation that almost cancels out the rest and relaxation of the vacation.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. But, I'm confident that you will find time to rest and relax when you are literally, in the future? Is Australia or is New Zealand in the future or in the past?
Oh
I
yeah,
don't
it's in
know.
the future. So I lose like 2 days over the course of my trip.
Yeah, so you'd be stressing about stuff that hasn't even happened yet, technically. So you might, you'll be able to relax, I'm sure.
Good way to put it. All right, Brenda, thank you.
Bye.
It's not even controversial anymore.
People know in Florida their freedoms are going to be respected.
I always end with some of your comments, and I will read a couple, but I want to focus on 2 in particular that I thought were really good. Anthony Tackett, who's a friend of mine, also a Patreon subscriber, he sent me an email that he sent to Manka Dhingra on Tuesday. So this is one day before the cutoff and before eventually, the police pursuit bill came to the floor, and she voted for it. Shocking. But I really, really appreciated the email that he sent her. And I asked him, I said, can I read it on the air? And he said, yes. I just really appreciated the tone of the email and the way that he went about it and his sort of thought process. And so I want to read at least part of this to you. He said to Manka Dhingra, hello. I wanted to address your refusal to allow this bill to be discussed and voted on by the legislature. This was a bipartisan effort, which I don't have to tell you how rare that is in this state. It was in response to passionate community outcry from Washingtonians across the state pleading with their state government to address the rampant crime that is occurring every single day. Emboldened criminals that know they don't have to stop when police attempt to pull them over. Criminals who run from police and often go on to commit more crimes, even violent crimes. This is a fact. The victim count raises almost daily. Is this more safe? He went on to say the bipartisan group that put this bill together were able to put aside their differences, listened to their constituents in a time of great need, and tried to put forward a reasonable solution. This is what the people expect of their leaders. This is what is expected of you. This solution may not be perfect, but don't let perfect get in the way of better. This will immediately make a positive impact, yet you block it. I'm going to read this whole email. It's so good. Day after day, we see examples of tragic things that happen to innocent people as a result of this situation. Last week was the latest and likely the most tragic example yet. 2 children paid the ultimate price. They were killed by a driver not long after police attempted to pull that driver over. And by the way, we found out the State Patrol tried to pull that guy over 4 times. It also sounds like a second agency attempted to stop the driver that same day, yet he fled and ended up killing innocent children. Still, after this tragic example, you have refused to allow discussion and a vote. Why? He went on to write to Senator Dhingra, you want us to believe that it's safer if police can't pursue suspects, then I have to ask, how safe are those 2 children? How safe were all the other victims of people who fled police? Your words say this is about safety, but your actions dramatically incongruent. If not about safety, what is this really about? People are saying the blood of these 2 children is on your hands. They are saying you should be held accountable. If you're really being honest with yourself, do you blame them? You say this needs to be studied, and you're not wrong. But while this is being studied, how many more people will be victimized? How many more people will get hurt? We need to make short-term policy decisions to provide relief, make it safer for our citizens, and also begin to study for ways to be better. Both need to happen. My hope is that with all the feedback you're receiving, that you really hear it, that you take a look in the mirror and listen to your conscience, self-reflect, and that might guide you to do what's right for the people of this state. Do what people are asking you to do. Put people over politics, the people who voted you into office. You have a duty and a responsibility, and you are failing the people of this state. You failed those 2 kids and countless future victims. If this does not change, there's still time to do the right thing. I reiterate, don't let perfect get in the way of better. Please allow the legislature to debate and vote on this critical bill. Regards, Anthony Tackett. Such a good email. Such a good email. And it's not a polarized political email. It's not highly ideological. And it's just about, this is about people. This isn't about politics. It's about people. And it's about the truth that we have a crime crisis on our hands. We have a lack of respect for the rule of law, and people are dying. So you're saying that it's about saving people's lives, but you have to acknowledge that people are dying on the back end. And for you to sort of weigh, and again, I'm not saying that people haven't died in police pursuits, but the number is very, very small. It happens very rarely. And for her not to kind of look at what's happening and say, okay, maybe this was an unintended consequence. So one of the reasons I wanted to read Anthony's full email is I got this other message, and I should have emailed her and asked for permission to read it, so I won't read the full message in its entirety, and I'll get back to her. I also haven't responded to you yet, but I've been crazy busy this week. And it was a couple that subscribes to the show, and they sent an email just kind of expressing frustration about how they're worried like what we're doing doesn't like mean anything, that it's not making a difference. She basically said, we listen to your show every week. We agree with most, if not all of your points, but it's become obvious to us that Washington voters Seattle voters basically are unabashed and unrepentant partisans who revel at not just disagreeing with those across the aisle, but virtually spitting on them when they do so. That has not tangibly changed, even as policy leads us to ruin, and I see no reason to believe it would change. This week has made it apparent that nothing we discuss really matters or has any actual effect on these voters, and they're not listening. She went on to say that basically she's just bathing in frustration and sadness of what we think is common sense in a form of echo chamber that does not serve any purpose for them. So I appreciate the honesty, and I do agree that we have a little bit of an echo chamber going on, but I think it's the best kind of echo chamber. It's people who are not highly ideological, who are independent thinkers and open to changing their minds. And when you become open to changing your mind when presented with facts, that is you not allowing yourself to be encapsulated in an echo chamber. But, I look at this week and I think what we're doing is making a difference. I read emails like the one Anthony Tackett wrote to Senator Manka Dhingra, and I've heard from several legislative aides that whenever we post something about a certain bill and urge people to reach out, they're inundated. And so you guys taking the steps to say, okay, I'm not just going to passively seethe and be angry. I'm going to call, I'm going to email, I'm going to try to make a difference, because if I don't do those things and complain, then what have I really done? And to see people, several subscribers who came down actually on a work day in the middle of the day to the state capitol in Olympia to rally and to be there and to make their voices heard. I mean, it just filled me with pride and with joy. And, this movement, and we call it a movement to give common sense a comeback, it's not going to happen overnight. I don't know if it'll happen at all in terms of being able to actually affect change in a massive way. But what else do we do if we don't try? And it's about, not necessarily about this massive change anyway. It's about trying to get individuals to be brave, people who are in the middle, who look at the far right and the far left screaming as loud as they can, being nasty and vitriolic, and they're like, I don't want anything to do with that. So they take their reason and common sense and they just close it off and they don't engage because they're scared of what engaging looks like. This is about pushing past that fear for every individual. And you're going to hear a lot about this next week as we start this Truth Teller series. You're going to hear from people who never set out to become public figures or to become, experts on certain issues, to become outspoken critics of government policies. But it started with them as a normal, everyday citizen, getting to the point where they were fed up and coming to a crossroads and saying, either I can go down this path of staying silent and being angry and seething and feeling frustrated like nothing's ever going to change, or I can pivot and I can speak out and I cannot give a damn what the consequences of that are, because the consequence of staying silent is greater. So to this subscriber, again, I won't use your name because I didn't ask you if I could. I appreciate the honesty, and I appreciate that there is a level of despair that can come when you feel like, man, this doesn't make any sense and it's not getting any better. But I will tell you that I really do believe in what we're doing. I wouldn't have quit my job in TV. There was no reason for me to quit my job in TV to do this if I didn't believe in what we were doing. I loved my job. I was making great money. I was having a blast. There was no reason to quit it other than I saw a need for these types of conversations. And I saw something that I was uniquely positioned to deliver. So I would ask you to hold on a little longer and to fight back a little harder. Don't let it ruin your happiness, but remember what we're trying to build and that each individual person is an important part of that puzzle. But thank you guys for your thoughtful emails, as always. I feel like we've had a very deep show today, deep conversation. I want to end with just a couple clips of our Truth Tellers series to give you a taste of what is to come for the next 2 weeks, celebrating people in our communities who have told the truth on controversial issues.
It's just outrageous, and I don't understand it. I'm 56 years old. I literally have, it's like when I hear somebody say it's just a property crime, I'm like, shame on you. I mean, where is your common sense, and where is your sense of right and wrong?
I didn't realize I was waking up this activist monster that came after me and still does. I have a horrific online defamation of character campaign against me, just for picking up trash.
Give people grace. Everybody's human. We're gonna make mistakes. I very much am, we talked about it earlier. I'll stand up and say, I messed up, right? And I'm gonna fix it and I'm gonna do better. And in other places in life, in sports, you lose, so stand back up and win again. We don't tell the team you should just go away, right?
Disband.
just we're done.
Yeah.
You lost a game, move on.
Yeah.
But we do it to people. And I don't think that's okay.
How deep we're getting on the podcast today.
I feel an obligation to speak out because, again, if I don't, I'm responsible, equally responsible. And I can't live with myself doing that. And so, sometimes you do have to do and say uncomfortable things because you have a duty to the truth and duty to other people.
Things aren't being solved and people are moving. Real, genuinely nice people that just don't want to rock the boat are leaving because they're not comfortable with the environment around them. And it's only going to get worse. So we can wait for that, or we can do something about it. So I'm just going to try to do something about it and try to get as many people to support that and then go and influence this stuff, because you can't really deny progress when it actually happens.
All right, that's it for this Friday edition of Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. I hope you'll join us as a subscriber, join in the mission and the movement. You can do that for $5 a month on Patreon, patreon.com/undivided, or by becoming a contributor on my locals community, brandikruse.locals.com. We will be back on Monday with the first in our series of Truth Teller interviews. I'll see you then.